The NES was truly ahead of its time. From the distinct design, its library of iconic games, the unforgettable controller, this is a true icon in gaming. But why is that? Most people are aware of the story of how this thing came to be in America. After the video game crash of 1983, Nintendo took a huge risk coming over to America to sell their successful Famicom from Japan. But after a few redesigns and a Trojan horse, they successfully put their redesigned and renamed Famicom, now called the Nintendo Entertainment System, on American store shelves. This system was the most popular of the third-gen systems, those being the NES, Sega Master System, and Atari 7800. However, I was surprised to find out that it's actually not the most powerful. That honor goes to the Master System. Nonetheless, the NES has a Ryko 2A03 for its CPU, producing 1.79 MHz, a Ryko PPU for its GPU. It has 4.277 kilobytes of RAM, producing 240p video, and Nintendo refers to the system as 8-bit. Bits were all the rage back in the day. The more bits you had, the more powerful your system. NES was 8-bit, SNES was 16-bit, N64 was, well, I wouldn't want to spoil that one. But yeah, in today's world, this thing is pretty pitiful. Back then, however, it was pretty powerful. Taking a look at the design of this thing, it definitely has its quirks, but I really like it. It's got a rectangular design with tapered edges, a black strip down the right side, 2 controller ports, 2 buttons, and the cartridge slot that differs from the rest of the competition. Normally, games were put in through the top of a system, but due to the video game crash and Nintendo trying to get this thing out on the market, they designed this thing to look and feel like a VHS player. Nintendo actually called this thing an entertainment system, and the game cartridges were called game packs. There was no mention of a video game system or video games in sight. With the system itself, you have to manually open the lid, slide your game in till it's snug, then push it down for it to work. It feels ancient, and while I like the look of the system, this method of reading games is not only tedious, but also causes the pin reader to break down. The first NES I got all the way back in 2017 barely works because of this, and this second one that I have right here that I bought a few months ago also struggles, just not as much.
No way that actually kind of worked.
Overall, I like the design of this thing. It's definitely an older looking system and is also a little bit too big, but it's better than the plain black fridge Xbox over here. I think that's why I like this system's design so much. It has different colors and cool design choices that make it stand out. Take the front. It very boldly says Nintendo Entertainment System. The Xbox Series X has none of that going for it. It's a plain black rectangle with a small Xbox power button in the top left corner. Anyways, while the NES might look the part, the most important of any video game system is arguably the games. The Master System was the more powerful system, yet it only sold 10 million units compared to the NES's 62 million. That's because when your box art looks like this and you don't have any system sellers, no one wants to buy your system. But the NES had so many good games that, using modern emulation, I think still hold up to this day. Even the games that are objectively bad, like the black box sports titles, I believe are fun to pop in every once in a while. But the reason you get a Nintendo system is for the first party titles, and with this being the very first Nintendo system, it's where many series started out. Zelda, Metroid, Kid Icarus, Punch-Out, Earthbound, Excitebike, and Dr. Mario all made their debut here. Not only that, but existing series established themselves, like Mario, Tetris, Kirby, and a plethora of other franchises. Plus, Nintendo had all the third-party support back then, getting Mega Man, Castlevania, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest, just to name a few. All of these games started during this era, and most of them are still getting entries to this day. Take The Legend of Zelda, the first entry in what would become a long-running series. This game was an action-adventure game with strong elements of exploration and puzzle solving that would define the series as it continued. However, this first game also had elements of an open world. Nothing was off limits as long as you had the right equipment, and you could play the game however you wanted. And while later Zelda games abandoned this, opting for a more linear experience, Nintendo returned to this formula with the 2017 Switch game Breath of the Wild, where the first demo of this game was made to look like the NES original. Super Mario Bros. Also still has heavy influence on Mario games today, and while I will admit that a lot of it is Nintendo pandering to people nostalgic over World 1-1, Super Mario Bros. And the 2D Mario formula in general are beloved by all. In fact, Super Mario Bros. Remains the best-selling Mario game of all time, having sold 58 million units in ranking as the 13th best-selling video game of all time. Those are pretty crazy achievements, and as I said, 2D Mario is beloved by all. New Super Mario Bros. On the DS is the second best-selling Mario game, and the newest 2D Mario sold just over 16 million units. While the first entry in this series is nothing crazy nowadays, I 100% see how so many people loved this game. And while both versions of the second game aren't great, as one of them was way too hard and the other one just kinda sucks, the third game is my favorite 2D Mario. It's quick, the graphics are great for the NES, I love the level design, and the controls are buttery smooth. It's a really fun time. Then we've also got Metroid, another action-adventure game like Zelda, but this one is much more linear. That doesn't take away from the fact that it's still just as open-ended as Zelda, to the point where I actually had to use a guide when beating it for the first time. It's incredibly fun traversing through this world, finding secrets, upgrading your gear, and beating bosses. However, it is really constrained, as there's no map and literally no hint as to where to go. And let's not forget about Tetris. While the series didn't start here, I have such a fondness for the series as a whole, and the NES entry is very solid. Kirby is a fun and simple platformer where you can copy your enemy's powers. Earthbound is a charming RPG. There are tons of arcade high score based games like Galaga, Donkey Kong, and Dr. Mario. Even the games that are factually not great, like Urban Champion or the Black Box sports games, are fun to pop in and mess around with. And using an NES advantage on games like Galaga are one of the closest feelings you can get to playing this in an arcade. It makes the port go from feeling alright to extremely close to the original. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention Duck Hunt. This was a high score based shooting game where you use a fake gun to shoot ducks down. It's incredibly simple, yet remarkably fun. I really wish they'd release a modern version of this game with a motion control based gun, because although the technology for the light gun isn't present in modern TVs, you don't need it with motion controls. And while the game was re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console, it hasn't been back since, and that just used the Wii remote instead of a fake gun controller. The games on this system are fantastic, and even today, they hold up pretty well in my opinion. However, that is due to the bias I have playing these using the Nintendo Switch 2. On an actual NES, these games do feel dated. There's no save system, the controls can feel weird and sluggish at times, the picture is fuzzy, and some of these games are extremely hard, especially without a save system. If you die in these games, you're sent right back to the beginning. If you decide to take a break from playing and turn off the NES, you're sent right back to the beginning. However, with Nintendo Classics on the Switch, these issues aren't present. You can create save states whenever you want, load into one of 4 save states whenever you want, and even rewind the game itself. While purists might scoff at these features and say things like, oh, you're not really playing the game, or it doesn't count if you beat the game using these features, who cares? I mean, they obviously do, but just play the game how you want. I only beat Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels using the rewind feature because that game is extremely difficult on its own. And to me, that's not a bad thing. Yeah, I can't say I have beaten it without using save states and rewind, but I don't really care. I played the game, thought it was tough, and moved on. However, when talking about how dated the games feel, there is one feature that all official NES games have that was pretty revolutionary at the time. See, the video game crash was caused by too many garbage, unpublished video games being poured onto the market, and consumers got overwhelmed and upset. Games aren't cheap, so spending a pretty penny on a game that looks cool only for it to look like, yeah, that caused the crash. Nintendo took steps to prevent this and introduced the 10 NES lockout chip. This chip was used to restrict the console to only play games that were licensed for the system. This was a big deal, as it meant that while not all games were perfect, there was a lot more restriction of what a system could play, leaving less room for garbage games and more room for more refined experiences. And in turn, this helped gain back consumer trust. Also, I do want to backtrack on what I said earlier about playing these games on older hardware. Because yeah, the issues such as no save states and the games being more difficult is frustrating, but playing these games on an actual NES using a CRT will always beat emulation in my opinion. I could play Tetris on Nintendo Classics, but why would I do that when I have Tetris Forever or Tetris 99 on the same system? However, popping in the same Tetris game on my NES is a more authentic and better feeling experience. In my eyes, nothing beats playing these games the way they were meant to be played. But that also doesn't take away from being able to play these games on a modern system. I like having both options available. The NES was a household staple in the 80s and early 90s. Everyone wanted one, and its success helped redefine the video game market and created gaming as we know it today. Without the NES, I'm not sure where gaming would have been. Sega created the Genesis because of the success of the NES. Sony created the PlayStation because of a failed partnership with Nintendo, and Microsoft entered the ring because of the growing popularity of video games. All possible because of the NES. Even today, the NES shapes gaming. When Nintendo released the NES Classic in 2016 and the SNES Classic in 2017, companies quickly saw how successful they were and rushed to create their own versions of Nintendo's innovation. While some of them were cool, the only real ones that I'd say were worth buying were the PlayStation Classic and Sega Genesis Classic. They aren't nearly as good as Nintendo's offerings, but they still look cool. Lastly, I want to talk about Rob the Robot and the Power Glove. While I don't have a Power Glove, the general consensus behind it was that it looks cool, but it just doesn't function that great. And Rob is unfortunately the same way. Rob, or Robotic Operating Buddy, was created to put the NES in the toy aisle. As stated previously, no one wanted to buy video games, let alone an entirely new system. Rob was packaged with the NES to first make it look like a toy. He also came with a few accessories so that he could properly play the games that required him, and only 2 games actually support him: Gyromite and Stack Up. While Rob looks cool and Nintendo's plan of using him as a Trojan horse worked, he's the same as the Power Glove. It looks cool, but doesn't function that great. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I still have 2 of these guys. But yeah, the NES is a gaming icon. While Nintendo has milked it dry of nostalgia, looking at it from a historical point of view, this is a fantastic piece of hardware. It has so many iconic games and franchises that are still going strong to this day. I might not have grown up with this thing, but I still really like it. But what do you think?